My mother-in-law looked me in the eye 3 days after I buried my husband and told me I had 48 hours to get out of the house we had built together. She said my name like it was something she had accidentally stepped in. She called me a leech, a gold digger, a girl who had attached herself to her son and was now trying to claim what was never mine. I was 26 years old, 7 months pregnant, standing in the kitchen of the home where my husband and I had painted the walls ourselves on a Saturday afternoon while dancing to music neither of us could name. And she slid a legal document across the counter and walked away without looking back. 7 years later, I was sitting in my home office in Charleston, South Carolina, reviewing a contract worth more than my mother-in-law's house, when my housekeeper knocked on the door and told me there was an older woman at the front gate who said she was family. I turned to the security monitor mounted beside my window. The camera showed a figure standing in the late afternoon heat, wearing clothes that were expensive once and now just looked tired. She had aged in the way that people age when they spend years watching everything they built slowly fall apart. She was holding her purse with both hands, the way people hold things they are afraid of losing. I recognized her immediately. I told my housekeeper to let her wait. I had some things to finish first. My name is Claire Hartley. That is the name I kept, even after she tried to take everything connected to it. And before I tell you what happened when I finally walked out to meet her, you need to understand how a 26-year-old widow, with nothing but a 7-month belly and $2,000 in a checking account, became the woman she was now waiting on. My husband Daniel died on a Tuesday in November. Black ice on Route 17, a truck that came out of nowhere, a phone call that rearranged every single thing I understood about the future. We had been married 3 years. We had just started talking about names for the baby. He had a list in his phone, I know, because I scrolled through it later, sitting on the floor of our bathroom at 2 a.m, reading names he would never get to say out loud. The grief was total. The kind that does not feel like sadness so much as it feels like the ground has been removed from under you and you are just falling, and waiting for something to stop you. I did not eat for 2 days. My sister flew in from Ohio and sat with me and made sure I drank water. I do not remember much of that week except the cold and the way the house smelled like him still, and the way I kept forgetting for half a second and then remembering again. My mother-in-law arrived on Thursday. Eleanor Hartley was 61 years old and had spent those 61 years arranging the world according to what she felt she deserved. Daniel was her only child. She had never thought I was good enough for him, not because of anything I had done, but because I had not come from the kind of family she considered acceptable. My father was a high school shop teacher. My mother worked at a dental office. We were comfortable and happy, and she treated that like a character flaw. Daniel knew how she felt. We had talked about it, calmly, honestly, the way people talk about things they cannot change but need to name. He had told her plainly that I was his wife and she would treat me accordingly. She had smiled and agreed and then spent 3 years making small cuts, a comment here, a deliberate slight there, a pattern of behavior so consistent it could not be accidental. I had managed it because Daniel was there. Without him, I was exposed. She sat down at the kitchen table on Thursday morning and informed me that the house had been purchased with a loan co-signed by the Hartley Family Trust. She said the trust superseded my claim as a spouse under the specific terms of the agreement. She had a folder. She had a lawyer's name on a business card. She laid it all out like a business presentation, like she had been planning it, like she had a version of this conversation ready in case it ever became necessary. I asked her if she understood that I was 7 months pregnant with her son's child. She said that had no bearing on the legal matter at hand. I asked her where she expected me to go. She said that was not her concern. I had $2,040 in a personal checking account. The joint account had already been frozen pending probate. I had a car with 80,000 miles on it, and a bag I packed in 48 hours while my mother-in-law sat in the living room watching television like she was waiting for a flight. I did not take the furniture. I took my clothes, Daniel's watch, the photograph from our wedding that sat on the nightstand on my side of the bed, and a blanket we had bought at a flea market in Savannah on our first anniversary. My mother-in-law did not say goodbye. She walked me to the door and closed it behind me before I reached my car. I sat in that car for 20 minutes trying to remember how to be a person. Then I drove to my sister's apartment in Columbia because it was the only address I could think of. My sister, Rachel, was 29, and lived in a one-bedroom apartment with a pull-out couch that had a bar that hit directly in the middle of your back. She held me while I cried, and she did not say anything, which was the right thing to do. The next morning she made coffee and sat across from me at her small kitchen table and said, "Okay, what do we do next? Not what happened, not how terrible, just what do we do next?" That is the kind of sister she is. I did not have money for a lawyer, not a real one. I had enough for a consultation with a family law attorney named Patricia Webb, who sat across from me in a small office and reviewed what Eleanor had presented and told me that the trust agreement was real, but the interpretation was aggressive and possibly challengeable. She said it would take time and money. I did not have to fight it, and that even if I won, I would win a house full of memories I might not want to live in alone. She said I needed to think about what I actually wanted versus what felt like justice. What I wanted was my husband back. What felt like justice was my mother-in-law understanding what she had done. Neither of those was available to me. I made a decision that afternoon in Patricia Webb's parking lot. I was not going to fight over the house. I was going to build something she could never reach. Getting a job at 7 months pregnant with no local address and a resume that showed 3 years of work as a project coordinator for a mid-sized construction firm proved to be exactly as difficult as it sounds. I applied to 14 places in 2 weeks. 11 did not respond. 2 told me they were looking for someone with more availability. 1 told me directly, with no apparent awareness of how that sounded, that they preferred candidates who could commit to a full year without interruption. The 15th application was for a design assistant position at a residential interior firm called Lena Sparrow Interiors. It was smaller than anywhere else I had applied, located in a converted Victorian on a side street, with hand-lettered signage and plants in the window. I had dressed as professionally as my limited wardrobe allowed. I sat across from a woman named Lena who was 60-something, with silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and who looked at my application for less than 30 seconds before looking at me instead. She asked me what I thought of the room we were sitting in. I told her the natural light was extraordinary, but it was being undercut by the furniture placement, that moving the desk 45 degrees toward the window would double the usable brightness without adding a single fixture, and that the rug was working against the warmth in the walls instead of supporting it. She hired me the following Monday. Lena Sparrow did not hire me out of pity. She hired me because she recognized something she said she had not seen in a long time, which was someone who looked at a room and saw not what was there but what it could become. She told me later that in 40 years of interior design, that ability was rarer than any specific skill or credential, and that she could teach technique but she could not teach instinct. I started at $32,000 a year, answering phones, scheduling client visits, and quietly absorbing everything I could about how the business worked. My son was born 8 weeks later. I named him Owen, because Daniel had written it first on his list, the top name he had circled twice. Owen came into the world on a Sunday morning while Rachel held my hand, and Lena sent flowers to the hospital with a card that said, "Take all the time you need, but not too much, because we have a Beaufort project starting in January." I went back to work 6 weeks after Owen was born with a new clarity that I did not have before. I had a child now. There was no version of this story where I failed him. I worked during his naps, took calls during his feedings, built a system of notes and lists and schedules so precise that I could run on 5 hours of sleep without dropping a single responsibility. Rachel helped in the evenings. Lena adjusted my hours without being asked and never mentioned it. Within a year, I was no longer just scheduling and answering phones. I was managing client accounts, drafting design proposals, handling procurement. Lena gave me increasing responsibility the way Arthur Finley types do, one careful challenge at a time, watching to see if I could carry it before loading more. I could always carry it. I had been carrying things since that Tuesday in November. 2 years in, Lena handed me a client she said was difficult. An older gentleman who had rebuilt his house twice in 10 years and fired 2 designers in the process. She said she was giving him to me not because she wanted to be rid of him, but because she thought I could handle him in a way she could not anymore. That was her way of saying he was a test and she expected me to pass it. His name was Gerald Ashworth. He was 72, a retired federal judge, precise and demanding, and deeply frustrated by people who told him what they thought he wanted to hear. I did not tell him what he wanted to hear. I told him that his previous designers had been trying to recreate the home he used to have, and that what he actually needed was a home that served the life he was living now, which was a different thing entirely. He stared at me for a long moment and said that was the most useful sentence anyone in my profession had said to him in 5 years. The project came out beautifully. He referred me to 4 people. Those 4 people referred me to 11 more. I started running numbers in a notebook I kept hidden in my desk drawer. Client volume, project margins, the gap between what Lena billed and what I was generating. I was not doing it out of disloyalty. I was doing it because I had a child and a plan, and the plan required information. The numbers told me what I had been slowly understanding without letting myself fully see. I was ready. I had the conversation with Lena on a Tuesday afternoon after everyone else had left the office. I sat across from her and told her directly that I was thinking about starting my own firm, that I would never poach her clients, that I was grateful for everything she had taught me, and that I wanted to have this conversation with her honestly instead of just disappearing one day. She looked at me for a long moment over her reading glasses. Then she said, "I have been waiting for you to say that for 18 months. What took you so long?" She offered to be a reference. She offered to pass me any overflow she could not handle. She told me to name my firm something that could grow beyond just my name. We hugged in the parking lot and I cried a little and she pretended not to notice. I named the firm Sparrow and Stone Design as a nod to the woman who had opened the first door. I incorporated in South Carolina on Owen's 3rd birthday. My first office was the 2nd bedroom of the apartment Rachel and I had moved into together, with Owen's toys pushed against one wall and a folding table I had bought at a discount store. My first independent client was Gerald Ashworth, who called the week after I opened and said he had a friend in need of help and wanted to give them my number. Within 18 months, I had 8 clients and a lease on actual office space on King Street. Within 3 years, I was billing $2 million annually and had hired 5 people. Within 5 years, my name was appearing in regional design publications, and I was being asked to speak at industry events. I bought a 4-bedroom house in one of Charleston's historic neighborhoods on Owen's 5th birthday. I wrote a check for the down payment and did not let myself look at the number. Not because it hurt, but because I did not want to feel anything about money except that it was a tool, and tools were for building. I was careful about what I built personally, the same way I was careful professionally. I dated exactly twice in 5 years and both times ended the same way. Not with drama, but with the quiet recognition that I was not available in the way a person needed to be available for something real to grow. I did not resent that. I had Owen. I had the work. I had Rachel, who had moved back to Ohio but called every Sunday. I had a life I had constructed from nothing, and I was not willing to let anyone destabilize it before it was strong enough to hold the weight. The call from my mother-in-law's lawyer came in the spring of Owen's 6th year. Not Eleanor herself, but a lawyer named Greer, who spoke in the careful language of people who know they are calling from a weak position. He said Eleanor had been involved in a legal matter regarding the Hartley family trust. He said the trust had been mismanaged by the financial advisor she had relied on for 15 years. He said there had been significant losses. He said that Eleanor was facing the potential loss of her property and was interested in discussing a family resolution. Family resolution. I wrote those words down on the notepad beside my phone. Then I thanked the lawyer for calling and told him I would be in touch. I spent a week thinking about what I knew and what I did not know. I had already known about the trust problems. I had a friend who worked in Charleston real estate who had mentioned Eleanor's name in connection with a distressed property situation 2 years earlier. I had filed it away the way I filed most information about Eleanor, not to use immediately but to understand the full picture. The full picture had been filling itself in for years without any help from me. Eleanor had relied on a man who had been quietly stealing from her. The money she had used to push me out of Daniel's house had been borrowed against a future she did not actually have. I was not happy about this. I want to be clear about that. There was no satisfaction in what had happened to Eleanor. There was just a long, tired recognition that choices have consequences, and hers had caught up with her in the most practical way possible. My mother-in-law arrived at my front gate on a Thursday in April. My housekeeper found me in my home office, and I looked at the security monitor, and I made her wait 20 minutes while I finished what I was doing. Not out of cruelty, Because I needed to choose, consciously, who I was going to be in this conversation. I did not want anger making my decisions. I had learned years earlier that anger was expensive, and I could not afford to spend it. I walked out to the front path, and my mother-in-law saw me coming, and I watched her face do something complicated. She had not expected what she was seeing. She had expected the girl she remembered, the one who had stood in the kitchen crying, the one she had walked to the door and closed behind. She got me instead. The difference showed on her face. She had aged. Not badly, just completely. The way people age when they have been carrying something heavy for a long time and stopped putting it down at night. She was thinner. The confidence was gone, or not gone exactly, but hollow, like the frame of a building after a fire. She was wearing pearl earrings I recognized. She had worn them to our wedding. She had worn them to Daniel's funeral. She started with the approach people use when they have rehearsed something and lost the script halfway through. She said she had been thinking about me. She said she hoped I was well. She said she had heard I was doing wonderful things with my business. She said she thought about Daniel every day. I let her finish. Then I said, "I know why you are here." Her chin lifted slightly. "I know about the trust," I said. "I know about the advisor. I know the timeline of what happened, and I know that the house went into receivership in February. I have known pieces of this for 2 years. I wanted to understand all of it before you came to me, and now I do." She was quiet for a long moment. The late afternoon light was slanting through the oak trees along my front path, and somewhere inside the house I could hear Owen watching something on television, his laugh drifting out through an open window. "I thought you might know," she finally said. "You always paid attention to things I assumed you would miss." I took that for what it was. Not an apology, but an acknowledgement. She told me she needed help. "Not a great deal," she said. "Just enough to settle a specific debt that would release a smaller property she had managed to keep separate from the trust." She had worked out the numbers. She had a figure. She named it. It was not a small amount, but it was not a large one either. It was the kind of number that would not meaningfully affect my life and would meaningfully save hers. I looked at her for a moment without speaking. "The last time I asked you for help," I said, "I was 7 months pregnant and my husband had been dead for 3 days. You handed me a legal document and told me to leave." She flinched. "I am not saying that to hurt you," I told her. "I am saying it because I need you to understand what I am working from. That moment is where everything I have now started. Not because it made me stronger, though it did, but because it forced me to find out what I was capable of when there was no one to catch me." Eleanor looked at the ground. Then she looked back at me. There was something in her face that was not quite shame and not quite grief, but lived somewhere between them, in the territory that older people sometimes reach after years of being certain and then discovering, too late, the cost of that certainty. "I had reasons," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. "That is not the same as being right." She did not argue. I thought about Daniel. Not in the way I used to think about him, with the full weight of loss pressing down on me, but the way I think about him now, which is like returning to a room you love and finding it full of light. He would not have wanted me to help her out of obligation or guilt. He also would not have wanted me to refuse out of bitterness. He was too honest a person for either of those things. He used to say that the right choice was usually the one you could explain to yourself clearly at 2 in the morning. I had gotten very good at 2 in the morning. I told Eleanor that I was not going to give her money. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes went still. I said, "I am going to invest in the property you are trying to save. I will structure it as a commercial purchase. You will have no debt, no gift, no favor owed. The property will go on the books as an acquisition by my firm, and you will receive fair market value for it. Nothing more, nothing less. This is not generosity. This is a transaction. You get what you need. I get a property my firm can use. There is no relationship debt between us. There is no door opened that either of us has to walk through." She stared at me. "Why?" she said. "Because Owen is going to grow up," I told her. "And someday he is going to be old enough to understand what happened to his father, and to me, and to you. And when he asks me what I did when his grandmother came to me, I want to be able to look him in the eye and tell him that I was exactly the kind of person his father believed I was." Eleanor Hartley, who had not cried in front of me at Daniel's funeral, who had handed me a legal document without her voice breaking, who had closed a door behind me without looking back. That woman stood in my front path and cried, not loudly, just 2 lines of tears that she made no effort to hide and no effort to explain. She said, "He would have been proud of you." "I know," I said. "He told me that all the time." Owen appeared at the front door then, peering through the screen with the unself-conscious curiosity of a 7-year-old who has never had reason to fear anything. He had Daniel's eyes. He had Daniel's way of tilting his head when he was thinking about something. Every single day he showed me something I had not known I was carrying. "Mama," he called through the screen. "Are you coming in for dinner?" "In a few minutes," I called back. He looked at Eleanor. She looked at him. Something passed between them that I could not name, and was not sure I had the right to. "Hi," Owen said politely, the way I had raised him to say hello to strangers. "Hi," Eleanor said. Her voice broke on the word. He disappeared back inside. I told Eleanor my lawyer would be in touch about the property paperwork. I told her that was the extent of what I was offering. I told her that if she chose to pursue a relationship with Owen when he was older, that was a decision he would make for himself when he was capable of making it, and I would not interfere with that. She nodded slowly. Then she said something I had not expected. She said that in the weeks after Daniel died, when she had come with her folders and her lawyers and her plan, she had told herself that she was protecting her son's legacy, his family name, his estate. She said she had understood within a year that what she had actually done was destroy the last living piece of him by destroying me. That cost her something to say. I could see it. I did not tell her it was all right, because it was not. I did not tell her I forgave her, because I was not there yet. I told her I had heard her. Sometimes that is what you can honestly offer, and it has to be enough. She walked back to her car, an older model that had seen better years. She drove away slowly, the way people drive when they are not sure where they are going next. I stood in my front path until her taillights disappeared around the corner. The oak trees were full and green above me. Somewhere down the block, a neighbor's children were playing, and their voices drifted through the warm air like something from a different life. My life was this one. This house I had bought. This city I had chosen. This firm I had built from a folding table in a second bedroom. This boy inside who had Daniel's eyes and my stubbornness, and a happiness so uncomplicated it sometimes made me stop in the middle of the day just to look at him. I went inside and made dinner. Rachel called that evening, as she always did on Thursdays, and I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about that. I said, "Like I am done carrying something I did not know I was still holding." She said, "Good." She said, "You know you have always been the toughest person I know, and you never believed it." I told her that was what older sisters were for. After Owen was asleep, I sat in my home office with the lights low and the window open, and let myself feel the full weight of the day. Not the sadness, not the anger, not the long, complicated grief of everything that had led from Daniel's kitchen table to this chair in this room. Just the day itself. Just the fact that I had faced something I had been preparing for without knowing it for 7 years, and I had chosen who I wanted to be in that moment, and it had felt like myself. I kept a notebook in my desk drawer. Not for numbers anymore. For things I wanted to remember. I opened it and wrote, "Today I made a decision from strength instead of pain." I closed it again. The property deal went through 6 weeks later. It was a clean transaction. My lawyer and Eleanor's lawyer handled everything professionally, and there was no drama and no debt. Exactly as I had said. I heard through the transaction that Eleanor had moved into a smaller house in a different neighborhood and was doing well enough. I did not reach out and she did not reach out, and that was the right amount of distance for now. What I know is this. 7 years ago, a woman handed me a legal document and told me I had 48 hours to leave. She could not have known, in that kitchen, that she was also handing me the beginning of the only life I would have chosen for myself if I had been brave enough to choose it. She could not have known that the girl she walked to the door would come back as someone she could not move. She could not have known that the child she dismissed as an inconvenience would grow up happy and strong and entirely, completely loved. She did not give me that. I built that. Every piece of it, with my own hands, starting from a pull-out couch with a bar in the middle, and a number in a checking account that barely covered 3 months, and a due date circled on a calendar with nothing on the other side of it but uncertainty. If you are watching this, and someone has handed you their version of that legal document, whatever form it takes, a locked door, a voicemail, a silence that lasts too long, a person who decided you were worth less than their convenience, I want you to hear this. They are wrong. Not because you are special in the way people say when they want to make you feel better, but because their assessment of your value is based on what you have right now, and what you have right now is not what you are going to have. What you are going to have is what you decide to build. And no one can take that until you let them. I do not say any of this because things turned out well. I say it because I learned something that took me 7 years and 30,000 square feet of other people's homes, and one very honest notebook to understand. The people who underestimate you are only dangerous if you agree with them. I never agreed with her, not for a single day. My name is Claire Hartley. My husband loved me. My son has his eyes. My firm has my name on the door, and I wrote the check for that down payment myself.